All right. I started a series. I'm going to recap quickly. Just a short 3-part series within the Let's Think. Let's think about our money. Let's think about mastering money. And last week we told the story of a little man, the Bible politely says, a short man, named Zacchaeus, who was in debt morally, he was in debt socially, he was in debt relationally, but yet he was a very wealthy man. He had this dysfunctional relationship with money. And he wanted to meet Jesus. He climbs up a sycamore tree. And the reason he does it is because he's looking for far more than a view of Jesus. He needs an invitation of Jesus into his life. This guy needs help. And he shames himself. He's a very short man. How many of you know that if there's something about yourself you don't like, you normally try to hide it? No. No one here. This is the most honest church I've ever seen. We all have things in ourselves we don't like that we try to hide. How many Blue Bull supporters have jerseys on here this morning? But how many of you last week before the game had them on? 51-14, say no more. I was actually at the game last night, and my mouth is so dry, both from that shouting and because I've started these new fat burners. And I'm just saying. And my mouth's so flipping dry. I phoned the guy who gave them to me, and I said, what's going on? He says, oh, no, sorry, that's a natural consequence to these things. It gives you like in the mornings. Oh, shush, man. This auntie telling, listen, there's a reason the Bible says women must be quiet in church. Do you know why? Do you know why the Bible says women must be quiet in church? Because they're mostly right. Okay, girls, thank you. All right, anyway, let's get back to it. So, honestly, if there's things in our lives we don't like, we try to hide them. This guy doesn't. He's so desperate for help. He climbs up a tree. Everyone can obviously see T's mark, but the big thing is Jesus identifies with him. Jesus takes him into his own house. Jesus speaks with him. We don't know what the conversation is, but that man walked into 2 kinds of freedom that day. He walked into a spiritual reconciliation with God, and he walked into a financial reconciliation with God and with man, because he restored everything that he had stolen from people 4 times, and he gave half his possessions to the poor. In other words, the very thing that defined his bondage to money was released in a moment. That's kind of the thrust of where we went last week, and it's here found in the book of Luke chapter 19. Just to recap a few points, few things have the power to cause chaos in our lives like financial stress. An out-of-control financial picture leaves us feeling vulnerable and fearful. Remember the saying, what we don't deal with now will deal with us later. Remember that in terms of our credit cards, wallets, in terms of where I'm going now. No matter how full our energy buckets are or how intentionally we administrate our schedules, a dysfunctional relationship with money will result in an ever-present feeling of drowning. Anyone can have a dysfunctional relationship with money, regardless of whether you have no money at all. Not enough money, just enough money, or more than enough money. You can have a dysfunctional relationship with money regardless of how much you have or don't have. And then good stewardship of money brings freedom and life-changing peace when people surrender their hearts and finances to God's guidance and wisdom. Henry David Thoreau said, the price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. Zacchaeus exchanged his whole life for the price of financial security to discover that the pursuit of financial security lost him everything along the way. So there's a lot more to life than money. I mean, we know that, but it does influence us. And then my last point is that from last week is spiritual and financial reconciliation. Both begin with the same foundational doctrine. We must believe in Jesus. And we must believe in Jesus in the fullest extent of the word. So if you believe in Jesus, we don't just believe in him for salvation, we believe in him for everything. And so there are 5 central principles, and I'm telling you now, we're not going to get past 2. All right? I can say that with confidence because I only prepared 2. 2 of the 5 financial principles that form the foundation for full financial reconciliation with God. Here's number 1. All I have comes from God. I want to say out of all the 5, this is probably the most important one. All I have comes from God. In spite of the confident assertion of Frank Sinatra, no one did it their way. And can I also say, no one did it 100% on their own. No one on earth. I'm an avid student of history, and I hear that in September 1939, Hitler invaded Poland. I have it on good authority he didn't put one foot in Poland until the battle was done, because everyone went on his behalf. He didn't do it on his own. He had help. None of us got to where we are in life today by ourselves, all on our own ability. We got to where we are right now through the help of parents, siblings, friends, teachers, employers, customers, opportunities, as well as choices we've made along the way. And I want to tell you that all of these gifts were directed our way by our Father in heaven. I want to tell you, even your ability to breathe right now, to walk and move your body is a gift from your Father in heaven. Waking up this morning is a gift from your Father in heaven. James 1:17 says, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. God gave us life. He gave us talents, aptitudes. God gave us the capability to keep on learning and growing. He has continued to open up opportunities and doors for us throughout our lives. And a humble person will readily admit that everything good that comes our way comes from the loving hand and the loving heart of an incredible Father. Are you okay so far? And we need to face up to, and we need to pull down the strongholds of the independent man or the independent woman that says, I did it my way, because I will not, in terms of my financial status, in terms of what I have, I will never have the courage to release it to God until I'm prepared to own the fact that it's not mine and I didn't earn it by myself. Independence says it is mine. The independent spirit wants to supplant our faith and our confidence in the authority and lordship of God. The independent spirit wants us to come out from the submission to the authority of God. If God's word says something and we want to do something else, the independent spirit wants to go this way, whereas God wants us to go that way. And we have to fight this independent spirit when it comes to understanding that God has given us everything. You see, when we feel we've earned something all by ourselves, then we feel it's ours to use or dispose of all by ourselves. Then what results is an awkward tussle over who really owns our possessions, who owns our wallets, who owns our time, who owns our priorities, who owns our energy. Creeping into the first world mindset is one of my home and my stuff is my castle, and I alone dictate or call the shots regarding what's mine. And I'm telling you, it's even in church. And then we have a tiring fight, a constant clash of wills, because there's a constant struggle against pride, distraction, and fear. If a person wants to hold on to things as belonging to themselves, and they're not willing to accept that everything comes from God, and as Nick said, we're simply a steward of what God has for us. If we're not in that place, 3 things are more or less going to happen to us. Pride, distractions, and fear will result. I'm actually starting a series tonight, a mini-series, called Fight Club. This is what it's called. Fight Club, the art of spiritual warfare. And just say, it all boils down to this. Submit to God, resist the devil, and he flees from you. In other words, it all starts right here. Most of our stuff starts here. Let's look at the area of pride. Pride is one of the reasons why people cannot believe everything they have comes from God's hand. Because pride spreads to the degree we prize power over our possessions. My house, my car, my time. And pride spreads to the degree we presume that we have full authority over everything we own. What we see that we have, what we see as our own, rather than a gift from God, then we have to work harder than expected to protect it, to sustain it, or to grow it. You see, if God didn't provide it, if God didn't sustain it, if God isn't the one doing it, I have to. Then I have to work very hard. The kind of person who works 6 or 7 days a week, every week, all the time, has a distinct gap in his revelation that what he has comes from God, and God is able to give even when we aren't working. God is able to take care of us even when we aren't putting the extra pound in. How many people feel they're working enough? How many, possibly in this room, feel I work too much? How many times have we heard this phrase the last couple of years? My job is so demanding. And they give you X many hours, but you take that many because of this push. If you see, if God has given me this job, if God has given me this opportunity, it's going to be okay. And all I have to do is give my best within the allotted time, and I need to trust my Father and work through these principles. I need to understand everything I have is from Him. If not, pride comes in. Pride, unfortunately, creates the work addict. And the work addict morphs into Sisyphus. If you look behind me, there's a guy named Sisyphus. For those who, is that how you say it? Sisyphus was a guy who was condemned to an endless cycle of drudgery and futility, pushing a boulder up a mountain. Sisyphus was someone who felt that he was very proud of his possessions, self-aggrandizement. He looked at himself a whole lot. So the gods punished him by giving him a boulder, and for eternity, he would push this boulder up the hill. And as it gets to the very top, it would fall on him, and they'd both fall down, and you'd have to get it up again. And the only time that the struggle would end is if he finally got the boulder on the top of the hill. But it was designed by the gods that he'd get just like 20 feet from the top, and it would fall down again. You'd have to push it up for eternity. How many of us feel that our work environment is one where we're holding and pushing something uphill all the time? That is the beginnings of a work addict. And the hidden and the dark side of the work addict is that deep inside they actually believe, I'm just going to keep on pushing because unlike all these other idiots around me, I'm actually going to get to the top on my own. I actually will do it on my own. I heard the story of one of the wealthiest men in South Africa, living in Johannesburg right now, has more billions than almost anyone in the country, yet has 2 full-time nurses, lives on all sorts of machines to keep him alive because trying to push that thing up cost him everything. Living in Johannesburg today, won't tell you his name, top businessman. Like any addiction, pride spins us into the bondage of slavery because we feel I have to do this on my own. This is something I have to do. I have to sustain it. I can't not. And so we drift away from the hand of God. Now, when you're so proud that you feel, I just have to put my head down and work harder, funnily enough, what actually happens is we get distracted. Because when we believe what we have is our own efforts, we start to focus our attention on many things. Ever gone to the circus with a child? And then they have that moment where everyone comes into the ring. The clowns and the everything. And these kids just look like this. And I don't know, what do I focus on at once? It's like an adult with a DSTV remote. You sit with half of you. Click, 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 and me. Because there's always something I'm missing on another channel, I know. Hensia wants Let's Dance. The kids want National Geographic. And I'm flicking, but we're missing something here. How do we choose what to focus on when the whole sea of activity needs your attention now? Because pride says, this is mine. So if it's mine, I've got to keep all my balls in the air. Now, if you're trying to keep all your balls in the air, how do you choose what to focus on? Because when you focus on one thing, you get scared you're missing on other activities. Then nothing is seen properly because your senses literally get blurred by all the stuff coming at you. It could be your work, it could be your priorities, it could be expectations, it could be a number of things, and you feel you're trying to keep all of these balls in the air at the same time, you start getting distracted. And that's when it becomes deep inside, like a python squeezing your insides. You get anxious, you don't know what to do, you're overwhelmed. And here's the flip side of this, it's very interesting. People who find themselves in this place where they're getting distracted by many things, what actually kicks into place, the defense mechanism is actually rigidity. People are so scared of being overwhelmed by distraction, they start getting very rigid in their thoughts and opinions. And the more rigid they get, the more they think, I've just got to keep on pushing on doing things the same way. Things are going to change. It doesn't actually work that way. And you see it in someone's unbending commitment to what they're doing, even when it's not working. They are so distracted that they feel the only way I'll cope, like a lifeline, I've got to hold on to what I'm doing, and I'm going to hold on, and I don't care what happens now. I don't care who says anything. My mechanism right now is I'm just going to hold on. These people are often the very hardest to counsel. You know why? Because they need help, so they ask for help. But when you try and help them, they can't receive the help. Why? Because it violates the very rigid ideas they're holding on to. Caused by all the distractions. Who's ever been water skiing? Is Dean Levy here? Okay, because he owns a shop like that. What is the point of getting in water and having one ski up there and a guy on a boat that says, just hold on, it's all going to be fine? Then they gym that thing and you go and you get a hole full of water, face full of water. Maybe it's just me. But after you think, man, all I know is I've got to hold on to this thing and all I do is land on my face. And I hold on and I land on my face. Balance has never been a good thing for me. And what happens is you get so distracted by the noise and the water and you just hold on with everything in you. And then he says, but just lean back, Greg. Stuff you, I'm trying to hold on here. Let the thing pull you up. It's not working. And how many of us have been in that place? I salute anyone counseling such people. Because normally you find you're more committed to the process of change than they are. They need things to change, they want things to change, but they're not going to do it because they're so rigid, because pride says, I'm scared of failure. Distractions say, I've got to hold on to what I'm doing right now. How many of us identify? Saying, actually, I think that's a little bit of me, right there. Kind of people Jesus referred to as stiff-necked. And so these pride and distractions causes fear. Fear is the consequence of the unspoken belief that actually, ultimately, it is all up to my own effort. And I don't want to be seen as a failure. I don't want to be exposed and ridiculed because I don't know if I can do this. You know what's actually needed? Is simply a good, healthy dose of faith. Just to believe God. Jesus says things like this. If you've got faith as small as a mustard seed, you'll move a mountain. And financial debt for many people is a massive, massive mountain. And you need just enough faith, like Zacchaeus, to get up a tree and try and get Jesus' attention. Now here's the thing. When Jesus does get your attention, and he does call you aside, and he does begin to speak to you, you have to start believing what he says. We need to believe that we serve a good Father who knows us intimately. A good Father who has made a covenant to provide for our needs. Even King David says, never have I seen, ever, God's people begging bread. Never. We serve a good Father who showers us with blessings if you just look to him. A good Father who knows what we need before we ask. Do you know my story one day of how I got a car? Did I tell you guys? I told some of you. One day I got one car. Some people in the church got more than 2 cars. Some have got more than 3 cars. Me and my wife, 14 years, 1 car. So I stood in the shower one day. Showers are a great place for revelation. And I stood in the shower one day and I said, Lord, why can't you get someone there who's got extra cars just to give me one? Because we've only got one and I can't afford to. Please, Lord. Tuesday morning. In the shower, the Lord says, well, then put out your faith for me for one. Trust me right now. I said, okay, I trust you that someone's going to give me a car. Amen. Come to the elders meeting that morning, and the elder in charge of finance at that point says to me, Greg, do you know anything about a deposit for you put in the account? I said, no. He said, oh, because last Friday, someone put a deposit in the account here, 100,000 rand, into the church account, and it says for Greg for a car. God knows what we need before we ask him. Then God gave me the privilege of, so I tithed, had 90,000 rand left, bought a nice car, drove it for a while, and then God told me to give it to someone in this church. So I did. Because what you have isn't yours. But we also have a God in heaven who knows what we need, listen, before we've asked him. We serve a God who's a good Father who rewards those who diligently seek Him. Friends, if you want to break this thing that your possessions are God's and not yours, sometimes you just need to seek His face and say, Lord, help me just do what you say. Help me, Lord, even like I'm using that example of the skiing. I finally got to stand up. Because Dean Levy turns around and says to me, Greg, for goodness sake, okay, I was lying as well. It wasn't one ski, it was two. I'd never do one. I think two is worse than one because they do this all the time. But he said to me, please just hold on, wait, and the boat will pull you up without any help from yourself. So on the 18th try, my arms are dead. I thought, I have nothing left in me anyway. I can't pull myself up. I'm just going to wait. Whoop, and I was standing. A stick figure, grant you, but I was standing. And I stood for that whole length of time. Then he did this, and I came off. But when we diligently seek Him without putting effort in, you see how the Lord begins to speak back to you and remind you that what's yours is actually His. We serve a good Father who teaches us His supernatural ways. And these principles are God's ways. Walk out of here today settled in one thing. Everything I have, I receive from God. So, how do I get more? I learn how to receive. I learn how to keep receiving from His hand. I learn how to keep trusting in Him for what I need. And of course, the last one is we serve a good Father who loves us so much. He sent His Son to redeem us from the horror of death and sin and wrath. Will He not so much more care for you now that you're His child? I want the best for my kids. I'm sure your Father in heaven wants the best for you. You've got to believe that when Jesus goes to Zacchaeus and says, Zacchaeus, come down, I must eat with you today. Zacchaeus owned things, goes into a meeting with Jesus, comes out and owns nothing anymore. Jesus owns it all. And he listens to what Jesus says and he distributes. And then the end of the story is Jesus says, today salvation has come to this house. He is a child of Abraham. This is a man of faith. This is a man who believes. Are we okay on point one? That's why I told you we won't do more than two. I want to pause for a moment. Is there anyone here who's battling? Don't put your hand up. Because you're held in the vice grip of the belief that everything you have is yours. It actually isn't the Lord's. You then an owner, not a steward. And you need to move from being the owner and the work harder and the addict and I've got to provide. You've got to step away from that to get to the place where you say, everything I have comes from God. Everything I have. Even who I am today has been His gracious hand on my life, and who I'm going to be is His gracious hand on my life. Now, if you believe that, we can look at point two. If you believe you have a good Father and you are the recipient of everything He gives you, if you can do that, I can talk about point two, which is this: I live joyfully within God's current provision for my life. If God gave it to me and what He has chosen to give me, if He gives me this, I'm able to then live graciously under the amount of provision He's chosen to give me right now. It's human nature to look for greener pastures, better circumstances, more wealth, an easier life. We get caught up thinking if we had a better job, a better house, a better car, we'd be happier. It sounds logical almost, isn't it? Hey? Someone once said, I heard someone say, money doesn't solve all your problems, but I'd like to try. Money doesn't solve all my problems, but I'd still rather have problems and money than problems and no money. Sounds logical. Give a guy money, he's going to be happy. But therein lies the problem. Based on that assertion, people who live in wealthier countries should have happier lives, better marriages, and lower divorce rates. Because people in wealthier or more prosperous nations have more opportunity for education, medical care, home ownership, car ownership, food availability, and personal freedoms. Would you agree with that? The Western world has got all of that. More opportunities than the third world would ever dream of. It would almost seem that many, many people want to live the American dream. They want to imitate life there. They want to relocate there. I want to go and live in the USA. I want the American dream. But in 2012, the Gallup poll ranked the United States 33rd in the world on the happiness scale. In fact, 7 of the 10 countries that are happiest are in Latin America, which ranks amongst the lowest on economic indicators. War-torn, civil war-torn Guatemala ranks just above Iraq on the United Nations Human Development Index, right? And Iraq's a mess. Is 7th highest in the world in terms of positive emotions. This means that a country with escalating gang violence, producing one of the world's highest homicide rates, which is crippling the economy, reflect the happiest people. What's going on? I quote from the Gallup poll. These data may surprise analysts and leaders who solely focus on traditional economic indicators. Residents of Panama, which ranks 90th in the world with respect to GDP per capita, are among the most likely to report positive emotions. Residents of Singapore, which ranks 5th in the world in terms of GDP per capita, is the least likely to report positive emotions. I've been to Singapore. It's like ant land. If you've ever been there, just all day long. They are reported as the least happiest people on the earth. Translation, more money doesn't equal greater happiness. If I wanted to, I could have given us all the scriptures that talk about what money does. How when you've got it, you worry about it. It's only people with money who look at the stock exchange. People without it couldn't give a continental. Isn't it? I mean, what's that? But I'm worth so much. Tomorrow I'm worth so much. Now I'm worth that much. And every time our president fires somebody, I'm now worth this much. Because your worth is determined by points on a scale someone else set according to principles you don't even understand. Oh, look what I'm worth. Money does not equal greater happiness. There are psychiatrists and psychologists who will tell you that the vast majority of their patients are wealthy people because they have far more cares and concerns than others. Paul the Apostle agrees. Few of us have ever experienced what he went through. Look at 2 Corinthians 11:23. I've had far greater labors, far more imprisonments, with countless beatings, and often near death. 5 times I received at the hand of the Jews the 40 lashes less 1. What does your back look like when you had 39 lashes 5 times? 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. That's with a rock. Or a number of rocks. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea, on frequent journeys in danger of rivers, danger from robbers, dangers from our own people, danger from the Gentiles. Danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers. In toil, hardship, through many a sleepless night, in hunger, thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. And apart from other things, there is a daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches. Who is weak and I'm not weak? Who's made to fall and I'm not indignant? If I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. Question I want to ask, did these circumstances dictate Paul's happiness? Would you be any less happy if you truly lived like this man did, who lived for the sake of the gospel? It would read in this thing that nothing suited him at all ever. But would that make him unhappy? I would say he was a lot happier than Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus is up the tree with everything. Paul is in the mire with nothing. But listen to Paul's words in Philippians 4:11. Not that I'm speaking of being in need. I have learned in whatever situation to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In every and any circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. What is Paul trying to say through that? He is absolutely, fully reconciled to God financially. Because he's able to accept God's current provision and provision level for his life. Now listen, provision goes up and down through our lifetimes. We have times we've got more than other times, but we must learn to be content in both. It is our responsibility to make the adjustments so we can live within God's provision and be joyfully content, whether it's a season of plenty or a season of not so plenty. We have to learn to be content, because this belief carries two very important implications. If I'm saying we need to live under the level of God's provision, and you've got to settle with what God has given you for this season, it carries this first implication. How do you cope when someone else seems more blessed than you? What happens when the next person walks in more apparent favor than you do? Does it produce covetousness, envy, jealousy, anger? When someone else does better than you, but you feel you're working just as hard? When someone gets promoted above you, when someone is blessed more than you think you should have been? Or you think they certainly don't deserve it, you do. If you live joyfully under God's provision for your life, you can genuinely be happy for what other people have and just live at peace with what you have. Second implication, this is very important, it raises the issue of debt. By definition, debt comes from wanting more than God's current provision for your life, and arranging other ways to get it. So God has dictated for me at this point that this is where I'm going to live. I want to live there. God isn't providing it, so I've got to arrange other means to get it. I go straight to the bank and I start signing off for things that I know I can't afford. God's provision includes up and downs over the course of a lifetime. Job changes, the economic climate, decisions we make, decisions made for us by others, good or bad timing. You'll only ever know financial peace when you learn to live joyfully within God's provision in every season of our lives. We need to build margin between what God gives us and what we spend. All too often, you'll experience followers of Jesus who really love God but spend far more than God has chosen to give them in that season. It's really not helpful to overspend in order to create an inflated artificial lifestyle. It creates, through debt and borrowing, a false sense of provision. The Bible says that debt puts you in bondage to the lender. What does that mean? It means because you have to spend some of your future life to earn the money to pay back debt you incurred there. Okay? So you say, all right, I'm going to go for a loan and I have to spend my future life paying on something I agreed to back then. I'm now in debt to the lender. He holds the purse strings. And suddenly we're no longer in complete of our financial life, and as a consequence, nor is God. I want to say to you this morning that I reckon most of us would probably benefit from the exercise of simplifying our lives. Working to a place where we free ourselves of debt we carry. Even if it's a process that takes time. Number one, everything I have comes from God, which means the next time I want something, let me ask, is this something God wants me to have? Then ask the question, if God wants me to have it, is the provision for it under my current level of His blessing? If not, I don't even need to pray about it. Just don't do it. You don't understand. I want this nicer home. I want this newer car. I want this, but God's only doing this. I'll take a loan. I think if I do this, I think I can. Don't think anything. Try not to. Just say, Lord, everything I have comes from you. If this is from you, it will fit within the level or the margin of blessing you've decided I live in right now. Some of the things we think about, we can just take off the table right away. As we make adjustments in our spending, we create margins in our lives, and that breeds contentment. What Hensi and I have started to do, or what we did start to do, was I pay off all the stuff I need to pay, electricity and the house and all that stuff. And then I work out our disposable income. I divide it by 4, and I say we have so much for every 7 days. Which means if on day 5, you find that perfect blouse that's on sale at Woolies, today only. You don't borrow from next week because it's a bad principle. You just say, oh Lord, bless whoever has it. Can I say this? When it comes to our finances, the implication of simplified living are massive for our kids and our grandkids. We can set up future generations to live within God's provision by the way we teach them. Many of us that don't get ahead in anything is because we had families who never got ahead. And they never taught us financial principles. I was taught much by my parents, but financial principles wasn't one of them. Can I tell you a story? On the one time my dad taught me a financial principle. And don't hold this against me. At the age of 13, we go down to Durban, to what was called on West Beach there, called the Lonsdale Hotel. And my family, we go down on holiday to the beach, and my dad, in those days, 1984, gives me the grand sum of 12 rand for the whole week we're going to be on holiday. In those days, you know how much money 12 rand was worth, eh? Big bucks. My brother got 10, and my sister, I don't know what she got. But I know I got 12 bucks. My dad said, now, cold drinks, chips, ice creams, anything you want on the beach. I don't hear your voice for a week. Deal. Got all this cash. I put this loot in my pocket. This is a true story. I walk out of the Lonsdale. You turn left on West Street to go to the beach. When you turn right, there's an Indian shop right next door to me who sells like throwing stars and flick knives. This is a true story. I walked out and I turned right. I walked out with a 12 rand flick knife. Later that Monday, I'm thirsty. I want a Coke. I said, my Dad, can I have a Coke, please? He says, well, where's your money? I said, I spent it on a knife. He said, on what? I said, here, a flick knife. He said, are you thirsty? I said, yes. He said, go flick your knife. And he didn't get me a thing for a week. Imagine a life of owing no debt to anyone. Imagine you got up tomorrow morning, all you owe is what you use for electricity and, stuff that you give, the normal stuff you have to give out. But you weren't in debt to somebody. How would it feel to live debt-free? I want to warn you right now, there's a little voice right now telling you it's impossible for you. And I want to tell you, that little voice does not come from heaven. We can get out of the bondage of debt by following God's principles. I'm telling you, in less time than you can imagine. If you're willing to say, Lord, this is what I earn, that's what I spend, it needs to change. Please hear what I'm saying, not what I'm not saying. But if you believe that everything you have is given from God, and you're going to choose to live within the margins He gives you, you will find joy and contentment. And you will put this thing down. Stand with me, please.